somewhere when it was.
Probably Sunset. I think she goes to the Montessori.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Hurry. I think Steven's gonna get online.
Yeah, he emailed that he was gonna get online until he could come over.
And he's already online.
Morning.
Off like a whole bag of like local cherries. I
Nice.
couldn't help myself, so.
Are you feeling okay?
Yeah, I'll see you later. Like, I all knew that.
Wait, that's already, I have the 5:30 already went through it. I have like, yeah. Every other minute I'm pretty much.
What is your job?
Oh, yeah.
I was seeing cherries so much, and I always forget there, you can't eat like a whole.
Because I mean, I usually think that it works just like, but it. But then get to. There's everything, that's regular.
I grew up with that.
I just.
Two overproducing peach trees. Same thing. in
He teaches all days.
And they
I don't know, I think, yeah.
How many peaches do you eat?
8, 11, not good. Not that they're cherries, hit your guts like. Yeah.
Tell my partner about that, cause he's been having some issues with. Well, I've asked him, I said, you eat any fiber that's like natural? Kind of natural fiber?
Fiber. Eight. Fiber.
Welcome on the screen there, Steve.
Excellent. Right stuff.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Fuck, Monday morning.
You're Thursday.
It was rough.
I'm meaning it on that class, I got. Well, why was it
It
rough?
was windy and
Oh, yeah.
Did I start it?
Crazy.
Did I
Saturday
start
next.
it?
Yeah, you did, it's good, it's good. I had a cup at 5:30 when I got up this morning, Melody, and then went for a bike ride and haven't had any since, so. What,
All right.
what level of caffeine isn't where it should be?
Okay. We're live recording, everything's going all right. I will call this budget workshop meeting to order. It is 9:01 on the 23rd of June. Commissioners present are Commissioner Dean, Commissioner Hadler, Commissioner McCurdy, Commissioner McGann, Commissioner Martinez, Commissioner McCandless, and myself, Commissioner Winfield. Administrator Mark Tyner present, and we've also got the clerk auditor Gabe Wojtek and Stephen Valls with us as well. And so we will let you start this off, Gabe, and see where we want to go here.
Thank you, Chair.
We do a share, you make me able to share with.
Melody made it, actually.
The noise.
It's finishing up, it's bubbling.
Don't need it. Okay. Strong. Good, Steven?
Let me just try it again.
Should let
There we
you.
go.
Yeah.
Okay, so just gonna start with this document that offers a summary, and this is in the agenda packet. Just starts with a summary of kind of the main aspects of the proposed amendments.
Which one is it? Steve?
Where's your workshop?
Budget work.
123 budget.
123 budget amendment draft. And so there's some clarifications that are important to be made with regarding this, with regards to this. Reimbursement to Fund 23 general fund for TRT funds transferred from Fund 23 to Fund 47. So the important thing to note there is that 2023 and 2024 are that reimbursement transfer from Fund 10 to Fund 23 to reimburse Fund 23 is going to happen via an adjusting entry that will be reflected in the financial statements. And so sort of like that sort of cleanup, that sort of retroactive cleanup isn't something that would be handled in the current year budget. But thankfully, we're still in the process of reviewing and drafting the financial statements for 2024. And so they will reflect that transfer will reflect in those statements. And so really what we need to reflect in 2025 is the activity that's happened to date, which at this point, because the books are still open in 2025, the entirety of funds to date that have gone to the County Active Trails and Transportation can be easily amended to reflect that the expense is out of the general fund and not out of Fund 23. And so moving down here,
I pause just on that.
please, yes.
So I had a question on those numbers right there. So it looks like when I look at 147 on the balance or on the budget right here, you know, the incoming, sorry, it's going to take me just a second to find it
No problem.
right here. So I see the 566,376 right there for the 2020. That's 2024, 2025. I'm sorry, the 526,134. I see that coming in right there as you had it. The next though for 2024, I see it as a 566,376 out of 162. And then for 2023, I see it as a 482,847
Where do you see that?
on your budget. Or I'm sorry, on the budget for Fund 47 here. I can pass it.
That's.
47-3310-000-000 county TRT.
Let me just ask the question though, the budget. We're trying to transfer the actual, what we're representing this top line is the actual transfer of funds, TRT funds into Fund 47.
But the bottom line is the budget. So the bottom line doesn't match what the budget says.
Okay, all right, and we're gonna look at the number, but let's just agree one, if we're going to be looking at the actual transfer TRT funds to Fund 47, the GCAT, regardless of what the budget was.
Yes, you know, I agree with that, but if we're gonna do that, then we also need to then account for the reserve that was left over that went into the, because I think either which way you look at it, either it's gonna go all into GCAT and it all comes back out, right? So whatever was transferred in gets transferred out, or you could look at it as whatever was transferred in, right? And what was spent, then the remainder went into the reserve, and then we're gonna pull out of the reserve over. So I'm just wondering if that extra step is necessary.
Yes. We've calculated the net of transfer spent. So I think what we're saying.
Yeah.
Is take the actual transfer of TRT funds into Fund 47, GCAT.
Okay.
Net of unspent funds that will then become a surplus, if that becomes. Regardless of what we budgeted for that year. It's the actual transfer that matters.
Still, in 2024, you have 367. And right here on your amended budget, you have 566. The 250, 741, that matches for 2023 for the actual.
So what fund are you looking at? Cause I have the same document up right here.
73310-000-000 county.
You say 47?
Yeah, 47.
And I did make an update to this tentative that's in the packet.
So
On page 35-ish.
Okay, give me the other number.
Well, I just want to make sure that's.
So 47-3310.
Open the one that's. Just to make sure.
It's highlighted, right?
Zero is the lead.
47.
Page 35 is what they're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
uh,
This county TRT. Yeah, that shows an actual revenue of 566,376. I see that. Okay.
so
And that, and I see what you're saying. That doesn't match. That doesn't match 526, or no, that doesn't match 367.
Correct.
Correct.
I see that. Yeah, we'll just have to follow up and clarify that that discrepancy. I see that obviously deserves some explanation.
And I'm wondering if it's, when I went and looked at it, tried to look through it, I just had a couple of minutes because I didn't notice they got voted this morning. But it looks like there's, when we look at it in Fund 16 for that year, the 367 right there came into responsible recreation. But also that year, there was a 199,376, which would make up that difference right there. That came in from the promotion. So you guys had split the responsible recreation, it looks like, into two categories that year. So maybe it was just, maybe you were looking at the contribution rather than the receivable.
Exactly what the 367 was, is responsible recreation.
Yeah, but it's in, but so I think I was looking at it from 47 where it came in, and it had come in from two different accounts, so I think it just needs to be switched back over.
Yeah, and it could be, and yeah, again, there will be follow-up and clarification here. It could be that discrepancy is this 367, as Stephen just suggested, was just the transfer line from 23 to 47, and it could be that there was a pull from the fund balance in Fund 47 to make up for that. Discrepancy.
You can scroll up, you got your document from you, let's scroll up to Fund 16, because it's all sitting there in Fund 16, and I bet we can look at it real quick. So I think that, like you said, getting this set up before we have our books is the goal right now, right? You want to make sure that when our books are completed for 2024, that we're compliant and ready to go. So if we have just a minute, I'm sorry to take up so much time.
No, I thought that.
you're looking at 16-482-350.
What pages are there actually?
On page 14 of this one,
Scroll off.
page 14.
So 16, let's look.
So you can see that there's a $367,000 for responsible recreation that came out in the 16-4111940.
And there's also 16-4820-350-000 of 199,376.
Is that the difference those add together to make?
I don't know, I'm just taking a guess at it. I didn't have time to add it all up. But the way that I looked at it, I just went in and looked at the Fund 47, right? And I took Fund 47 and said how much was coming in, and that's how much should have been transferred back over.
Yep, I see what
Yeah.
you're,
I don't know if that's where the error's at or not, but it's what it seemed like.
we'll definitely look into it and apply as promptly as we can.
That's it right there.
Same number, 566.
And so
Total up. Yeah, the total up.
I referenced that this year, there's this to date, 162,286 that has been spent by the Grand County Active Trails and Transportation Program. That will be reflected in this amendment as coming out of the general fund. the total budget that currently reflects in the tentative proposed amendment out of the general fund for Grant County Active Trails Transportation is $526,134. That's all, and that's merely because that was the number that was included in the original approved budget, and so it's just carried over, but it's in there, not because, you know, not because we're making an assumption about the will of the commission and the expenditure of general fund monies. I think it appears that there might be a discussion that should be had about funding Grant County Active Trails and Transportation through this year and into the future.
Clarifying point, TRT is only a portion of whatever. So
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, the Trails Director just gave a clarifying point that TRT is not the only funding source of the Trails program. And I should more precisely state that this should be a conversation about funding the portion of the Trails Department that had been funded by TRT. Okay. The one other element of the amendment is the increase of the paid advertising line in Fund 23, which administers TRT promotion, increase of a line by $1.1 million. That's reflected in the overall cleanup that had been discussed earlier in this year of the Fund 23 budget, as has been discussed. And so we see in that cleanup responsible trail promotion amended to 0, and the advertising paid media increased by 1.1 million to that amount. And I have this this document also has this, I should want to make sure that we're using the right this one. I want to, yeah, I'll start back with, we'll move on to this next document, which is the budget workshop 623. So again, this is a summary of the highlighted amendment lines that are to be included in or that are currently in the proposed.
Where's, this is 623.
Budget workshop 623.
Got it.
Over the 214,612 over to a shortfall.
Where is that?
That's top
There's a
first
page.
line on the first page, starting at the top line.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I should clarify leading off that,
This is a little coarse. Oh, on the other
You're on the
side,
wrong.
the other side. Okay, there you go.
I should clarify leading off that there wasn't any intention or you know, that shortfall all being placed on the reduction in the contribution to law enforcement has nothing to do with you know, it being, you know, law enforcement that should have the contribution reduced. I mean, ultimately, all of the contributions of mitigation dollars to the general fund, you know, it's one or the other. It's all kind of a general fund offset. And convention has been to, you know, make some of the smaller baseline allocations of TRT mitigation to the general fund, and whatever was left over of that revenue source would be placed as that law enforcement contribution. So I want to make that very clear. This isn't in any way a judgment on my part to reduce the contribution to law enforcement via the mitigation funds. But I'll just lead off with that. What questions did you have, Brian?
Yeah, so just coming in, like I said, I didn't have time to add all this up. Is this coming up to that 877,756 that you had originally posted that our shortfall was going to be? I just want to make sure that what I'm working with and what you have are the same numbers right here, so that we don't get lost. So when we had this sheet right here that you put together,
Uh-huh.
And then you came in and you said this will be at 877,756.
Yeah,
And I'm sorry, it's just when we take it this way, I'm having a harder time seeing it when I saw it in the way that we had it presented earlier. I understood it a little bit better. I just want to make sure that the numbers are the same.
okay, yeah, I can reconcile why those representations, might be different, but what 214,612 represents is, the calculation based on what we have projected for this year with the statutory change. Taking effect on October 1st. And just on the mitigation. Just on TRT mitigation from what had been projected to 4342994. And in 2025, now I have projected at 4128382.
But that makes the assumption that we are going to take everything down equally, right there.
What do you mean by that? Can you clarify?
Well, I mean, so we're going to take down the law enforcement down 214,000, then we're going to take down yeah, I just don't understand how this is all, how you came up with this reduced to 214,600.
It's my understanding, Gabe, that the 214,612 to cover on 2A shortfall, is that due to the mitigation percentage change that comes into effect in HB 456?
Right.
Yeah, but we also have a lot of other things in there. We have solid waste inside there. We have search and rescue inside there. We have the museum, we have rec SSD, and then we have the GCAT responsible rec inside of all.
Well, I think what he was saying, instead of like taking a little bit out of all of them, he's just taking the shortfall. Cause either way you go, if we don't cut from those departments, we're taking out the general fund. So that 214 isn't necessarily law enforcement's budget because it's going to come back through the general fund. It just has to come out of the mitigation money.
Right, but 3 weeks ago, I got something that said it wasn't 214,000, that it was 877,756 is the shortfall. I'm trying to figure out, that's why I was asking, does this number right here match up with this number right here that was just produced?
I'll be happy to follow up. In subsequent budget workshops, I had presented the 214,612. That is the number that I presented. And how it shows up in that worksheet, I'm happy to follow up and give clarification there.
So Gabe, are you saying that we're only with the new law that's going into effect on July 1st, that we're only going to be in a $214,612 shortfall versus the, like he's saying, the 877,000 that we were looking at?
Right, and so it's important to note that 526,134, when we're talking about a shortfall, that number, Brian, that you quoted includes that.
Okay,
So what I'm talking about here is mitigation, right?
so you're talking about let's see here, law enforcement, solid waste, search and rescue? All three of those put together, or are you just talking about law enforcement?
I'm talking about TRT mitigation.
Correct, which would include solid waste and search and rescue, correct?
It's not, it doesn't,
All of our 3Ds?
I'm more focused on the revenue that we're receiving or not, and less on where it's being allocated.
So the mitigation revenue, what's the projection you have for the mitigation revenue then? 5,092,994, 92,000? Is that where you're sitting at?
I'd have to follow up. Make some notes here.
Yeah.
Okay, so currently, one other amendment that is highlighted is a fund balance draw that covers increased expenses and decreases in revenue. And so there is a little bit of a breakdown in some of those increased expenses and decreases in revenue in another document in the packet in this document, on another page of this document. But what had been budgeted as a draw from the fund balance of 1.1 million in the 2025 approved budget is proposed to be amended to 2.25 million in order to achieve a balanced budget.
Where do you see that? What page now?
The page that breaks into that, let's see, it would be the last page. And so that mainly is made up. But this reimbursement of TRT to fund 23 and 24, which we're going to follow up with making sure that we have the correct number there. That's not going to reflect in this proposed amendment. As I stated, that's going to reflect in the financial statements. However, that difference or that increase in the contribution from the fund balance is mainly made up by what I have highlighted here as increased unplanned expenses out of the general fund. And then what's highlighted here as decreases in revenue. There's an increase in the professional services line in the personnel services department. That would be appropriate to amend. I had made reference to recruitment services that have been hired this year for hiring of department heads, and some other legal related HR expenses that have been incurred that require such an amendment.
Now, are you just rounding that number? 10,000?
Right now it's at
1,000, or is that an actual?
Right now it's at 48. The actuals are at like 48 and some change.
Okay.
And so I did kind of round it to 50 in there. Yes,
Wanted to make sure.
good question. Economic development grants as part of the cleanup of Fund 23. That was shifted, the $200,000 was shifted to the general fund. And that is offset by revenue as well. And that actually should be, that 200,000 as revenue is another amended line, and that should be included in this list to demonstrate that that's not currently an expense without an associated revenue. And that's why it's not included in that table at the end. There's the URS contribution. So this is the employee benefits line in the sheriff's department. So there's that increase for the URS contribution. There's the funds that the TRT funds that are that have been pulled away from the trails department, and now it's just entered into as a general fund expense of $526,134. Special approval of $350,000 to Grand County EMS. All of the Fund 23 amendments, including reduction of that contribution to trails and increase to paid media. And so the bottom line of that fund has changed a little bit. And in this document, there's a detailed breakout of that amendment. And let's see. In Fund 47, we see there's that amendment of the reduction to zero of TRT going to that department. And an increase in that same amount from the general fund to make up for that funding gap. And then the reduction in TRT mitigation from a projected at the beginning of the year, $5,084,874. And this is where that $214,612 comes in, because the current projection of TRT mitigation has been reduced to $4,870,262.
But once again, that does, That's not the number, those numbers don't match once. I have 5,092,994. That's what the TRT mitigation was right there prior. So different,
Are you accounting for the interest income as well?
what's that? Yeah, this is your document that accounts for
Okay.
interest income right here.
How far will?
Yeah, so that number is off right there. And then once again, this just assumes that the department is going to be, or law enforcement is taking the entire cut right there.
I just added it in there because I had to add it somewhere, and you all have every liberty to decide how to reallocate that. And I tried to explain before that this had nothing to do with like my suggestion to reduce the law enforcement budget. Okay. So this is just a detailed breakout of the Fund 23 budget as would be amended.
Thank you. Just really quick on that top. Where is, I'm assuming these are kind of like overages for, anyways, just modifications, but the CJC purchase, should that be in that list or no? Is it absorbed someplace else?
So with CJC purchase, good question. So the opening 2025 capital projects, capital buildings budget line, it has been convention to budget what is available in the fund balance and just build that into the budget. And so the purchase of the CJC facility was within budget by virtue of capital buildings, having included in, the leeway to spend the fund balance. Knowing that all of those expenses go through an approval process, so it's not as though adding them into the budget would allow for a purchase like that to be made without, full vetting and approval. And so basically it's already in the budget, so it doesn't require an amendment.
As it stands to for Gabe, could we expand that so that it shows up better for those people watching online as well as even me right here? I've got the document printed, but
Thanks.
yeah.
And so with the increase in overall expenses, even with the decrease in the contribution to responsible trail promotion, however, the 1.1 million increase in this line for advertising paid media also required an increase from the contribution from the fund surplus in Fund 23, which is a fund surplus that is coming up against statutory limits and requires there to be a spend out to make sure that none of those funds are forfeited. And so this is a breakdown of capital projects and expenses that have been executed through Q2 2025. There have been a number of HVAC replacements on county facilities. 18,524 represents the amount that has been paid out of pocket, not covered by insurance. A number of HVAC replacements, and that total in the six figures. A couple of projects at the Old Spanish Trail Arena, cattle panels and lobby doors, which both had a 50% match with the Recreation Special Service District. And the number quoted here represents the Grand County's portion of that 50% match. The CJC facility here. So that's, that purchase or that transaction has been made. And then there's some equipment regarding camera and security and bolstered security at the Emergency Operations Center. I have to apologize for all of the acronyms included in this document. And so to date, the expenses total $96,355. The capital project general fund reserve balance sitting at 6.9 million.
You just received that. I can't see that screen.
One more time there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that's the capital reserve.
And we have some transfers as we're tying up 2024 in preparation for the financial statements. So it's important, I tried to specify that this reserve balance quoted amount is close to 2024 when we were preparing the 2025 budget. But I wanna sort of leave open the possibility that this, I think that this number is a good idea, but it might not be exact based on adjustments that are being made with the financial statements and transfers and entries that are helping to correct and close the books for 2024.
So I have a couple of questions on that.
Okay.
So would the CJC be on that right there? That should probably go under capital, right?
It is on there.
It is on there.
Okay, it's on there. Okay, there it is. I just can't see it. We got stuff on there. I came up with, I added up all this right here. I came up with 872. And I have cattle panels, I got those. 75. CJC is on there, HVAC is on there, 48. Star Hall is on there. Star Hall on there.
I think that you might be working off a different one because that 18,524, Brian, the HVAC replacement. On some
Yeah, that's-
previous
that's-
documents, I think he was showing the full cost and the insurance portion of
No, I
it.
have it close. I have that HVAC is 8582, so
Okay,
it's pretty close on there. Do you see Star Hall on there? Didn't we have to do a move for Star Hall?
was on the previous document. I remember seeing it, but I don't see it on.
So I'm reporting here expenses that are on the books.
Okay.
There are other budgeted capital project
And we
expenses.
probably haven't paid for Star Hall yet, because it just got done.
We probably haven't paid for it yet.
Oh, okay.
So at the bottom when it says capital project, general fund, reserve balance, the close of 20, that's just the capital, not the general fund.
Correct.
And then I had a question. You mentioned that there were some adjustments on that balance. Which way do you see that balance going? What are those adjustments?
I think it's likely that there were some debt payments in our municipal building authority funds that were unaccounted for. So I'm anticipating that this might go down in the range. I can't remember if it was just one it was an airport debt payment made. This wouldn't go, it would go down a little bit potentially, but not more than, a number like I don't know if it could be as much as $200,000 or $300,000 or less.
Question.
I think it represents a roughly, 90% or plus accurate figure. This question, yeah.
With this, even a previous approval of OSTA improvements, with previous approval of the pickleball court and the playground, it wouldn't reflect until we paid the bill, right?
Right.
Does it reflect? Is that 2024 balance right there reflect the previous approval?
No, that would only reflect money spent.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think
we're 25.
2024.
So the approval of OSTA pickleball wouldn't have drawn down.
Wouldn't be a line item. Yeah.
I mean, even if it were a line item and a budgeted line item, it still wouldn't hit this reserve balance until it was actually an actual expense.
Okay.
Do we know how much we can have in our general fund? What's the maximum amount?
It's I think it's 10% of the overall operating 50, I'm sorry.
You can find out, tell us.
I think it's 50% of the overall operating expenses. If I'm not mistaken.
For 1 year.
Yeah.
Just to clarify real quick, our overall operating expenses are right around 30 million.
General fund is more like 22 million.
22, and is that taking out the 8 million of TRT?
That's not taking the TRT into account, I believe.
That's not taking the TRT into account. Okay.
We're capped on the TRT, we're capped on the TRT one also.
Well, I'm just trying to get a general, this is for later.
So I'm going to the next page of this document where it kind of answers this, our general fund, Fund 10. The budgeted expenses for 2025 is 22,104,631. And so that's the total amount of expenses. So the metric for determining the reserve limit would be 50% of that.
2% of what again?
2 million.
Of 22 million. Yeah.
Oh, here.
And then that would reflect at the end of, like, you know, that 50% trigger would trigger at the end of this year after all this year's expenses hit. So we would have a chance to adjust at the end of this year, the end of year amendment. If we saw this general fund balance bumping up against 50%, we could budget a transfer in at the end of the year to capital projects, to stormwater, and make sure that wasn't bumping against the limit. So we were at this document a couple minutes ago. And it's a summary of unplanned general fund expenses on the books. I suppose based on the information that I was giving before, this 617,741, it's, you know, it's imprecise. It would probably be a line above. It wouldn't be, we wouldn't call it 2025 unplanned because we're not including that in the 2025 budget. It'll be reflected in financial statements as having been corrected in a previous period. But I did want to just include it in this tally to show that currently as proposed, that there is 1.5 million in that's coming out of general fund monies that hadn't been anticipated when we set the 2025 budget.
And the MISC HR, that's added up the airport and the PNC recruiters. Okay.
That's correct, as well as there are some other miscellaneous, that's over budget. So there's also some HR related legal expenses that are coded to that line.
Put another 10 grand in there.
Yeah.
And then the MC Gardner, should that be added on there as well?
Haven't spent it.
I was gonna try, yeah,
It's not yet.
that would be in TRT.
Maybe.
I'm just trying to get a full picture of where we're trying to lie at, you know?
And so just for the purposes of illustration here, there's this 22,104,000, which is, that's too much. That was the original opening budget, 22,104,631. If we look at half of the budget year, we're just basically splitting that in half through the end of June. That would look like 11,050,52 if we spent our, you know, if a budget operated on a linear basis. And so what we've spent out so far to date is 712,587. Sorry, compared to what 50% of the approved budget was, which is 11 million. It's food for thought. I think that it's hard without a lot more context. It's hard to take away. I'm not saying that, you know, I'm not suggesting that we're super in the clear because we've underspent our budget by $1.3 million. You know, I think that there are always expenses that are incurred in a non-linear fashion throughout the year. But it is a data point it is important, I guess, to illustrate that we are currently operating in a capacity that is responsibly within and under our budget. Which is a good thing. I think we've had a lot of sort of stressful circumstances and talking points regarding the budget, but it's good to know that we're under in that respect. And we have budgeted revenue, and then we have some impacts to revenue that have come to light since we set the revenue for 2025, which includes a shortfall in sales and use tax revenues and the reduction in the mitigation side of TRT. And so more appropriately, our projected revenue would come in at 21,635,909. That's what we can actually expect based on the information that we have in a updating of projections. The negative one point.
Where did the 1.5 come from?
And so that was an update of the after May revenues hit. So that's that 3-year moving projection that's been used to create the revenue projections. After the May revenues hit that, and Stephen gave a presentation and I quoted a negative 0.8 projection through the end of the year and sort of terms of crafting, what we could expect using that same model moving forward. So it's not a year over year, it's just following that 3-year moving trend. And
Year over year, we were 6 down, right? 6% down?
Yeah, so we got revenue data last Friday or Thursday. We went from a -5 to a -6.1 budget variance for this year. So that's -6% just budget variance for this year. But the model using the 3-year moving totals would still represent a -1.5% contraction for the year. So that range, let me just clarify, that range of, -1.5 for the year uses the 3-year moving average. The 6% number is just where we are at this point in time for this year.
Where you said it was a 6.1.
-6.1%.
And that's compared to last year?
Yes.
Okay.
No, the -6.1 is what we are under our budget.
Under our budget, okay, gotcha.
Yes, it's a percent of what we expected to receive. So this year today is an anomaly.
Is a
We
what?
are short this year compared to.
If we're 6% short, why are we projected sales tax revenue being? If we're actually 6% short, why are we showing or even representing the 1.5?
Let me that's a great question. I want to clarify this using just a metaphor. All right, you're standing on a beach. You're watching the waves roll in and you're trying to put your foot right where the waves are going to come in. You've watched 3 waves and you put your foot right where you expect that to be. That is our 3-year moving average. You watch 3 waves come through. We got 3 years of history, and the Moab, I would say, is pretty predictable. All right, so that's the 3-year mark of 1.5. But the next wave comes up, it's short. All right, am I gonna base my current assessment on just that one short wave, or am I gonna look at the 3 prior waves? So the 3-year history is the 1.5% contraction. Although the current wave we just saw, or what we're seeing right now, is coming in short.
And that's a big difference because you got 254,000 right there on the 1.5 and just a 6% up to 22 million. That's 1.32 million. So I'm just saying that that's a big gap right there.
So I would say our projection contraction for this year is somewhere between 1.5 or -6, depending on how you want to look at this wave. So I just described it.
I think for budgeting purposes and for departments moving forward, the 1.5 is not really accurate. If we want to try and get our departments to meet the shortfall that we're seeing this year, the 1.5 is inaccurate. We've got to utilize the 6.1 number as we move forward, and we can adjust that month to month if we want to, as we have. It went from what, 5 to 6.1 now?
-5 to -6.1.
Right, so it went from a -5 to now a -6.1. So if it continues on that trend throughout the year, 1.5 doesn't mean anything because that's history and it's in the past. What we're dealing with is a shortfall this year, and that's set currently at a -6.1.
As we go into the budget cycle, I would just propose that we, the team, decide what that number is.
Well, and I think we're in the budget cycle right now.
Yeah.
Consider this for the remainder of this year. We can't wait.
But
We're in the
what you're
budget.
saying is standard, and I know kind of discussions I've had with Kevin Walker. A standard is to use a longer term average that, it's. You know, we will all hope that this trend turns around. But to be reactive to a few months, and I feel like I've been very conservative, so I'm not trying to push an agenda one way or another, but I would think within your field, you understand.
Yeah.
Using, it's a standard to use a longer term average.
That's it, my 3-year model, 3-year
Right,
of 12-month moving averages is a standard.
right.
And that's why I'll stick to it. I mean, that's just what the math tells me. And it's an economic model. And you're right, you don't want to just react to the first couple of weeks, but that doesn't discount the fact that we
Right.
are.
We're 6 months in. We're not first couple of weeks here, Steve. We're 6 months into the year, so.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear that Kevin Walker's still in the middle of our budget here, but the reality of it is we're in a -6% for the year.
I'm not arguing with anybody. I'm just arguing the
Thank you.
models that I'm presenting to you all.
And I don't want to dumb this down and say that we want to use the 3-year average when we have to deal with the reality of this year and the economic shortfall that this year, this budget is going to come up with. And we can all hope that it changes over the next 6 months, but we're not a few weeks in. We're not even a few months in. We're 6 months in. We're at the halfway point here. And reality of it is we've got to be very conservative moving forward.
Were there's financial that came in on Thursday or Friday from April, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're, so, yeah, our Easter weekend didn't really help us out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, so
I would agree.
when I'm looking at the paper that you're on right now, it shows that the current projected revenue factoring shortfall is 21,635,909. But when I look at the proposed 25 budget amendment, that's the last one, if you go to the bottom of 10, Fund 10 revenue.
Yep.
You have as 23,239,130. So those numbers, so the budgeted that we had matches this 22,104,631, but that other that's in yellow, and I was adding up and subtracting all those different numbers to see where that maybe came from.
And so in the proposed amendment, I increased that contribution from the general fund balance to increase that revenue up to the 23. And I didn't transfer it over to this document.
Okay, so that will fix to this number, the 21,635
I believe, yeah, that,
should all add up. Okay.
yeah, sorry about that. And to follow up on the revenue projections, I think at this point, the only appropriate course forward is to, at the very least, present this 3-year rolling average metric, and also present the actual hard where we're at versus projection. And we'll present both numbers and allow the commission to decide.
Thank you.
Yep. And so that's the last page of this. Let's see, I'm just gonna run through some other items that were included in the packet. This was requested by Administrator Tyner, and it's looking at general fund departments. What the 2025 budget is, The year 2025 year-to-date budget, which in the footnote here states that that's just half, that represents half of what the approved budget is. And then what we have for year-to-date expenses, and just showing where departments are at in regards to, you know, if the budget had a linear progression throughout the year, are departments under or over budget? I didn't have a chance to comb through this. I think largely, you know, the trends have been conservative, and so that was information that was requested. If there's a more detailed analysis that's being requested than this, I'm happy to field that type of requests. This is me responding to that request to the best of my ability.
And looking over this, did you see any outliers over 50%, give or take?
I didn't, we have this, there's something like that, this non-department budget, and that's different because we have this, the administration of this, economic development grant. And so that's kind of, and that's not, you know, that's not really a department. That tends to be a grab bag anyhow.
Will that blow up any further?
Thank you.
There we go. You know,
Let's see. It looks like the sheriff's office, there's that URS increase over the approved budget. And so it looks like that office is, you know, the degree to which they have front loaded some inventory expenses and things of that nature. So that's something that I want to take into account. I don't want to say, the sheriff's department, they're already outspending. It just could be that there's different patterns of every department's, way every department operates, and it could be that the sheriff's office front loads their year with approved budgeted purchases. And also there's like a search and rescue. There's some other things to factor in, like this 42,000 year-to-date expense on a line that was approved for 7, and that's a grant funded expense. So that's another thing to be taken into account. So I wouldn't say, I wouldn't at all conclude that this particular department budget it could be appropriately stated that it's over 50% of the way there. It's just there's some other context there that explains why it's past its 50% threshold.
Dave, do you think that the senior citizens, which is 4311, they're below budget, but if you go down a little bit further, it's community center. Are those the same thing? And then they're over budget. Should those be combined? Are they is that the same thing?
You know, it's done that way because the senior citizens that's the sort of the portion of the grant center that receives funding and support from the AOG, from the Association of Local Governments, CERTA. And so it's broken out in a different category such that those expenses can be tracked more closely. And it could be that one is looking really low and the other one is looking high. There could be some miscodes there. It's not out of the question.
Okay.
It's definitely worth investigating.
Overall, it's under budget still if you add the two together.
Yeah, it would. Oh yeah, I see what you're getting at. It would be appropriate from an illustrative standpoint to kind of combine them. Yeah.
But to understand why they're separate makes sense.
So I guess to sum up as I scroll through the document, Mike, with the exception of a couple departments, which I think that there are real contextual reasons why they appear to be over their 50% budget. It does look like there aren't any real,
obvious standout
response.
Understand.
Yeah. But this is all like, I recognize that this is just fresh to you all, and I would absolutely welcome and encourage further discussion, clarification, follow up on this, because I recognize that we're would be hard to imagine being prepared to really get into action associated.
I guess I have one more question.
Sure.
The first attachment is the Fund 23 budget amendment draft, and we went over the first page, but then I had these additional ones that had the before and the after. But then if you look at the after compared to the budget workshop 6.23, some of the numbers don't match.
Yeah, and I know that, so I had to make sure Steven was able to get something into the packet on Friday. And he did a great job getting something in there, and I've been working through the weekend to sort of verify and
I would say that this one's the actual after, so we have
Yes.
obviously the board before matches, but the after, the one we want to go by is this the third attachment, the
Yeah.
budget workshop 6.23.
Exactly, yes, thanks for offering that clarification, and that's. But I think it would be appropriate even to update that and remove that other budget from the record here, so just to make sure that we know that one is more accurate, up to date.
Which ones are more up to date?
The budget workshop 623, okay, the one included in that document.
Thank you.
And then Gabe, I've got a question
Okay.
on the airport, the salaries and benefits.
Yeah.
I know we've been without a position out there, the director, for a couple of months, but yet it looks like we're over budget on salaries and benefits, more on the salaries side. We were using the 50% mark. Well, I guess we are using exactly, we are at 50%, so. It just would seem that we would be under budget on those numbers.
So I'm looking at 1045.62, is that what you're looking at?
Yes,
Okay. And so, yeah, we would have expected to be at 257, 238. By this time of the year with full staffing. And we're showing 225, so we're under 32,000 or so there.
okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I see what it is there,
Okay.
here today.
I might have expected it to be less, big.
No, I wasn't taking into account the first column. My apology.
That's all right. Let's see, I'm trying to call if there was another document. So I suppose, this is going to be further refined. There are some requests for clarification here that I'll be happy to respond to promptly. And, update information that would be included in next week's meeting. Are we sure that there's going to be a meeting next week?
Yes.
Okay. And I would say the really only question mark, currently there isn't any, there hasn't been any comment offered on the, oh boy. There hasn't been any comment offered on the funding out of the general fund of the Grant County Active Trails and Transportation. And so I've transferred the full amount that was budgeted of TRT rather as a transfer from the general fund. And so I would welcome any, in the absence of other comments, we'll move forward with that entered in the budget.
So you're saying that TRT.
I'm not following.
You're saying, are we gonna find active trails and transportation out of the general fund?
Correct. That's what with absence any.
Yeah,
In the absence of any
at a property taxes in, is where we funding that?
I haven't been given
I'm just asking what your
Yes.
question was. I'm just trying to clarify real quick. I don't know if
Yes.
everybody here was clear.
Well, let me just also repeat it a different way. In the approved budget, we provided 526,000 of funding to the GCAT. we're gonna reimburse that because that was TRT funds. But that funding in our assumption still exists, but it needs to come from the general fund now, unless
What is-
other actions
What
taken.
is the balance of the general fund after the reimbursements?
Well, we've spent about 126,000 year to date. So the five
Are you
twenty-six.
asking the overall general fund?
Overall general fund, where
No.
are we sitting at minus these reimbursements that we've made right now?
I don't even know if you can answer that accurately because we discussed earlier, the numbers for 23 and 24 are not accurate here.
You get a pretty good approximation, I think.
Yeah, I mean, well, it was, yeah, that's, at least for me, that would be helpful to know
Sure.
kind of where we're sitting at and then to start going through and looking where we want to make our cuts at.
Right, I agree with you to get that stuff cleaned up and then maybe do we develop and do we do that today? The kind of kind of hard questions. Where do we want to, you know what I mean?
I would.
What are the hard things we need to look at? And then the next time we come, kind of
Yeah,
prepared with defense or
yeah, but I mean, I just want to know
offense, defense. That's right.
which way. Is,
So yeah, we need to get,
what is the total that you have then for the reimbursement on 47?
617,741.
But you know, that was like, we weren't adding the two numbers in. Got it.
Well, I mean, maybe we can do this real quick.
We could, yeah, we could do it right there. Just take both numbers. and add them up.
Right now, let's go through, pull up the budget and then let's go to Fund 47.
$625. 147.
Yeah, Fund 47, let's look at line 3310. 3310 dash 0000 dash 000. Yeah, those are. It's page 26 on the PDF or page 26. 26 on the document, oh my God.
This page is Fund 47 though, right?
Fund 47, yeah, 47, 3310, and that shows all of the contributions right there.
Yep. All right, it's that one right there, 566 rather than, okay.
Okay,
So for 23,
yeah, we can start at 23, so we have actuals of
566, 376.
257.
23, I have. Well, and I think we should just make a decision now. Do we want to try to figure out the reimbursement later? Or do we want to just add it in right here? That was the original question.
Which.
So if you're looking at
last-
it, let's look at 23 right here. You have 482,847 that was budgeted. And then you had 250,741 that was actually spent. That was your actuals. But that reserve right there went into the GCAT reserve fund. Is that correct?
What reserve, what reserve, the difference between 250 and 400 or?
Yeah, the difference between the 250 and the 482.
What page and line are you on, Brian?
I'm on page 26, line 47, 33, 10 dash 000 dash 000.
26, you said?
Stephen, do you? 5, if you're in your packet.
Okay, there, okay, I'm
I have the budget on here and I was just looking on the budget of what it says on the actual budget.
Page 35.
And you're talking about which number?
So you have 482,847. And then you have an actual of 250,741.
So he's asking what happened to the difference between those two.
Only 250 was transferred.
Yeah, there's no net there.
Only 250 was transferred over.
So
And it's important to note that 566 was what the budget was amended to. And what's not displayed here is what was actually spent in 2024. I ended up amending, the budget stayed at 566 in TRT to Fund 47. But that doesn't reflect what the actual ended up being in 2024. That's just the budgeted amount.
Okay, so that's not what actually was spent right there. But for 2024, 566,376 was spent, right?
I would have to follow up on that. I think you brought to light, that other line, that promotion line. And I want to verify that.
Okay, well, we're just gonna assume at the moment that we're gonna do the whole 566,376. Just for today's kind of like red line.
Repeat that, please.
Well, for today, for the moment, we're gonna assume that we're gonna transfer that entire 566,376 into our general fund, or out of our general fund, so. We're at 257,401 and 566,376. And then this year to date
That one.
is 162,286. Would that be what we were doing year to date, or would we do the whole time, the whole budget? Okay.
Just what we've transferred today.
If I get 900, 979,403.
Coming out
I
of
get,
it,
coming out of the general fund rate.
General fund back into fund 23.
979,403.
and that's all in if we go with what's on here.
Yes,
Yes, right.
that's it right there. So that's what our transfer is. So then what is our general fund balance at? Right now,
Well, at the end of 2024, it was at 10 million.
the 20, so it's at 10 million.
10 million.
About 10 million. We'll look it up, but it's about 10 million.
So we're looking at sitting roughly around 9 million then after this transfer with our general fund.
Yep.
Plus.
Plus the EMS.
Well, hold on, yeah, and then plus our unplanned expenses, which I had at about 400,000. Right, and then plus, if you wanted to put in the shortfall that we're gonna be having because of HB 456. Right, which is it's gonna range a little bit, but I had that at 877. Does any of this sound about right, just to give us kind of some guardrails of where we're looking to kind of go? I think that's what I'm looking for, is just the guardrails of where we're really at, like just an overall kind of picture so that we can make some of these hard decisions like Trish was just talking about.
That strikes me as a useful ballpark figure to be able to make decisions.
Okay,
So I know what's what.
so hold on one second. So we got 9 million that's sitting, we have 10 million in the general fund right now.
Wait, didn't we start with 10.6 in the general?
Yeah.
10.6, so
yeah.
yeah, 10.6 in the general fund. You have just about, what did we say, 950,000? Is that what that number what just was?
I think so.
Yeah, so you have 950 that's coming out of the reimbursement. Okay, you have 877 that we're gonna be short on the
TRT mitigation money.
TRT. Hold on one second, because that includes the 526 right there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right,
Double dipping on that.
so yeah, we don't want to double dip on that, so take at 877 minus the 526. So that's 351.
Yeah.
Yep, so you're looking at another 350 there.
And then what, $400,000 for overspending.
And then you have 400 for overspend. Expenses.
So we're down 8.9 million. Approximately.
And that doesn't take into account what looks like an underspend on the budget so far this year.
Yes, that's awesome. Yeah, if that looks like it, if we have a negative 6%.
And that's a little bit less tangible, but
If we have a negative 6% growth, then we're gonna be even.
that makes sense.
So we would have a leftover in our general fund, 8.9 million. And then if we go over to our capital, we have spent $700,000, 0.9, and if so we're still over $6 million in our capital.
So combined, we're sitting at about 15.
15 and
Savings. What was it when you started on the commission, Mary? 1 or 2 million.
Yeah, it said there was nothing.
very low. Very, very low. We didn't have a fund to
We don't
draw.
wanna go back that way though either.
No, we definitely don't. I
Definitely
think that took a lot of work, a lot of our choices to get us such a good fund balance. Budgetedly.
Steve, your 6.1 shortfall that you're showing, is that taken into account TRT and what our TRT is down this year?
Yes,
Is that an average of everything?
yes, this minus 6.1 is all sales and use taxes, non-property taxes. You know, and some are varied. TRT is down, restaurant is up. You know, so it varies. TRT, car rental are down. Sales and county option is down, but restaurant is up, but it averages minus 6.1%.
Well, I think it's clear that we need to tighten our belts here somewhat for the rest of this year and moving forward. I know I've already had some discussions with the sheriff who's back here watching us diligently work through this and
Well, just on that note, we are starting the budget cycle right now. And part of the budget advisory board, I think one of the first things we'd want to do is provide guidance. What should we set 2026 budget at? You know, what could be proposed? All right, 95% of what we had last year.
Right.
I mean, but we would decide that and start moving towards working with department heads on estimating next year's budget.
well, we have to work with department heads on the rest of this year's
And
fundraiser.
that's true as well.
Where I'm at. And I mean, we're at the point here where we've got to consider essential services and non-essential services moving forward.
I don't know if we can invite people to talk, I know that Maddie, so that group has been a huge topic. And I know she's been working on some things, like when we talked, some ideas of her budget, so I don't know when that would be appropriate to listen to those things or share in our decision making.
But we already saw our full presentation. Is there something new that we're unaware of that didn't make it into the presentation?
Or again, is it best to kind of compile a list of items that we want to start addressing and then maybe at that time?
Well, if we want to try to put this on our July 1st agenda as a budget approval, we have a really short time frame to get these conversations done.
Understood.
And we could start with this TRT right here, just because it's kind of all already been laid out in this document. And that we got a $350,000 short right there minus GCAT. Right, and so we're gonna have to make some decisions on, do we want to have law enforcement, solid waste, search and rescue, which are our essential services right there out of the general fund.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the way my brain works. It's like, let's start at the top
Yep.
and start moving down.
Right.
I don't know if we want to straw poll that or if we want to make a vote or how we want to do that.
I think, are we just coming up with the list that we're gonna compile?
think we're deciding-
I mean, they're right here. That's the essential services that we have funded out of TRT is law enforcement, solid waste, search and rescue. We just came up that it's gonna be $350,000 short on what we had budgeted and to what we're projecting to have at the end of the year. Right, I say we just start tackling them right off the bat. Let's go down through them.
So you're talking about changing budget on those three essentials?
We're either gonna we have one of two choices. We can either change the budget and we can fund that out of general fund, or we can reduce that budget. Those are our only two choices that I see.
I think it's, that's, at this point, I would say, tell them that, where we're at, but I would, I know most of the departments already done their budget and are scheduled and working and trying to keep things in line. I would say take it out of general fund right now.
I'm all for funding essential services out of general fund itself. But I don't know if we want to do a vote or if we want to do a straw poll or.
I'd be up for funding it out of the general fund for the remainder of this year and then looking at it more holistically for next year. I think
We don't wanna, that's gonna really mess
Yeah.
up a lot of people if we start taking money.
Yeah, we're
from-
already halfway through, I think
And
we've
that
heard
would be so,
expectations through the rest of the year, but anyways, I'd be happy to do a straw poll too. That's just kind of where I'm at right now.
I'm ready to take it out of general fund.
So would we need to put an actual agenda item on the next meeting and vote on this? So we're straw polling right now and we are making up agenda items for the July one.
Right.
Correct. Yep. And I was gonna note, if you're gonna invite anybody to speak, give them as much time as you can. And I think that if you open it up for one, anybody else's budget that's gonna get touched will also want to be heard.
Right.
Obviously, folks are here today. So I just make sure that whatever your expectations are for that meeting, be it having people present or whatever it's going to be, to have it clearly laid out. I would probably recommend, if it's gonna be another workshop style, I'd recommend allotting 2 hours for it. An hour is not gonna be enough.
And that'd be, and then we have to do a public hearing for an amendment, correct?
So you can, and then you can vote on, right now, if you're going to do a workshop at the same day that you're going to do a vote, our policy does suggest that it's not encouraged to do a workshop the same day you vote on it. So you'd have to vote on that as well. On suspending policy.
Right, and we wouldn't want to suspend policy. I mean, if there's public input, it would be better to then vote at the next meeting, which is what, July
15th.
Yep. Right.
So you're saying, so we're looking at now next, the first, having
Another
a
one.
workshop
Another workshop
and a public hearing.
and a public hearing.
And
Yes.
then on the 15th, have the vote. Okay, that sounds,
Does that still allow that transfer to happen prior to that, Gabe? That transfer will have happened prior for the 2024 financials?
Yeah, because we
Right,
already
we're
voted
doing-
on that.
We have two things going on, right? We have 2024 and what's happened there, and what we're talking about now is 2025. Correct? So those transfers will have been completed before we have to put our financials in.
We'll be to the bottom of what the transfers are. Here and today or tomorrow.
As soon as we come up with the numbers.
I just want to make sure that when John Hadley goes and does our audit, that's been taken care of. That's my concern there.
I will not be able to be here before workshop, before the next meeting.
And you're talking about the transfers, the motion was made in the last meeting, correct?
Just want to make sure that that's done. So our audit
First.
Leaving tomorrow, yeah.
I'm gonna be traveling, coming back, but I was thinking I would, July is, it's always been like this. July is so hard. Because people have been like planned a year ago to do something up. Yeah, we'll,
There's too much business here that we can't postpone.
oh, I know, I'm just trying to think how,
July.
so you can't be here for the workshop, Jeff?
I mean, I'm gonna be out of town, so I would try to zoom in, but I'm not actually gonna be traveling also, so it would probably be difficult to get here early, so for a workshop before a meeting.
So for whatever you guys want, I would maybe decide on the structure of it now, how long you want the presentation, and then cut them off. If they can't keep it to that time, turn them off, because you guys are gonna have, everyone that's going to present is gonna want the same treatment, especially if their budget's up on the docket. So I don't know what that looks like. Is it 10 minutes? Is it 15 minutes?
I would say we can break it up into, we have it listed here. We have our essential services. You have law enforcement, solid waste, search and rescue. And then we could have a second session right there, which looks like it would be the museum, rec SSD, and then GCAT
Right.
right
I
there.
thought, I
Yes, right.
thought with essential services, decided to take it out.
No, we're gonna give everyone.
We haven't made those decisions yet.
Haven't made any.
I think we're just trying to structure next week. I agree with Brian. I think that sounds good.
If we want to do it, I think we would do it. Have each one of those people have a chance to present.
That being said,
I would think
maybe
10 minutes be more than enough. I mean,
Hour just for them to present,
An hour.
an hour for them to present, and then
So have all
Hours
those
for
three essential services. Well,
it would be my recommendation is 10 minutes with question and answers. I hate to say it, but do you know, with questions, sorry.
I agree.
You know, like something like 5-minute presentation and they're gonna have to blow through it.
Can we do this prior to the meeting? We want to try to do this.
In the workshop.
No, we want to do this workshop prior to the meeting. So
Yes.
that maybe we can have the.
I think that was the goal, to do a 2-hour workshop prior.
I think what he's asking
No,
is
no, no.
before people leave town.
People leave town, can we pick another day?
Oh,
Jock, go ahead. I know you've had your hand up.
I leave at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I'm gonna be gone and traveling, so but everything's gonna be a bit difficult for me. I guess honestly, it would just work out better if I'm all in on the one day, but it's still hard to say because we don't have a set travel schedule. And then Bill, I was just gonna ask that Maddie's had her hand up for a while, if you wouldn't mind recognizing her.
I have a clarifying question. So for July 1st for present, are you looking for like a presentation about budget contingencies? Are you looking for budget information, or can you provide a little guidance on like what department heads will be presenting on?
I think for this right here, we're looking for, as it relates to TRT 2A2, 2AII. I think that's kind of what we're looking at is for me, it's how do we get this right here in line? And then the second question I think that we're gonna have to answer, right, as a body is how we're going to adjust to that either 1.1 or that 1.5 cut or that 6% cut. Because if we're looking at, you know, at the generous side of 250,000, that's going to be coming out of that 8 million that we have left, or are we going to be looking at the 6%, which comes out to be 1.32 million, right? And so I think we're going to have to make maybe a recommendation to administration to make a, you know, just because we don't have performance reviews and we kind of just went through, we can't really see where there's anything in there. I think we're just gonna have to make a flat, you know, recommendation. We're gonna have to pick a number and say, we're gonna have to cut budgets, you know, straight down through at this percentage for the remainder of the year.
Yeah, Stephen, you had something.
Yeah, and an additional question, if you're looking at these TRT and shifting from spending with TRT funds to general fund, I don't know if the commission's looking for a particular update or some items to being cut or some items being dropped and what that conversation looks like. I mean, it's either your department head's going to present, this is our original budget, and if we kept everything, we're asking for everything, or we make some changes. So I think it's important for the commission to be clear on what you guys want to see. And so maybe have a discussion about that now about, is that what you want to see? Do you want to see, hey, look, because we can't use TRT, we do this. If the answer was, hey, we're just going to cover you guys this year and we don't want to mess up whatever you guys have planned, that's a different discussion. But otherwise, 5 minutes, they're going to be shooting in the dark trying to give you 5 different options if they don't know where the trend is, because it's a different presentation for them. If it's, we're going to keep it this year, next year we'll talk in the fall, or it's, we expect some cuts. So, and I don't know what it is that you guys want, but otherwise, without some guidance, you know, they're trying to plan for a bunch of contingencies. Mary.
Mark, have we asked anyone? Have we sent out a question to the different departments and such, is that if they have something that they can get by with that was budgeted, and we'll move it to next year, or just hold on to it, we might find that there are, you know, that there's a lot of things that they already say, and if they could do that and give us,
right.
Say, I was planning on new computer, I'm just throwing something out, and I can get by this year without it, so that gives you this much, I could get by with, you know, and so we can, then we have an idea of what we can subtract.
I think, Mary, that's where Brian was going. It's like, we need to come up with a general percent, right? If we come up with a number, then we can go to the department heads and say, hey.
I'm asking, I think we should just ask them if there's something you can get by without
I think
for the
actually,
rest of the year.
I think both works actually. So we come up with that
Right.
percentage, find out what that number is. And there's gonna be some departments that are gonna be able to cut maybe a little bit more. And
Right.
Some departments that are like, if you take this away, that's,
Right.
that cuts out the whole department.
Yeah.
You know, so there might be.
We have sent out, I know Mark sent out the fact that we were looking at a shortfall this year already, but we haven't asked for anything specifically. We have basically decided to look at every position when we lose somebody as to how necessary it is to fill it. Because we don't want to be filling positions as people leave unless it's it's essential services at this point. Mike, please, sorry.
And going back to your wave analogy, wouldn't 5% be an easy percentage to at least throw some math off of? I mean, 5% down. Every department, look at yourself, 5% down.
Is like, as a department head, is that right now, cut 5% between now and the end of the year, or is that
Yeah.
next year for the budget?
No, just out of ease right now. I mean,
And one thing I'd also mention perhaps is remember, we run needing a surplus at the end of the year. We run under budget. So just because departments are willing to give up and cut, we shouldn't necessarily seek to spend that amount of money as well. I know you guys probably know that if a department is cutting things, that might free up money, but we're also reliant on those underspends already because of how we've done the budget. And
It's
so
over budgeted.
we've over budgeted. And so even if we cut those items, it doesn't necessarily translate into money that we've got a net positive.
this doesn't come back positive, I understand. But being a department head is 5% at,
It's really hard. It's hard because now all of a sudden, 5%, I can't cut 5% off salaries and benefits, so I can't touch that line item.
Yeah.
To me, that's, I think, 80-something% of my budget. So if you ask me not to take 5% off the copier that we purchased, I can't do that either. Some departments, it's really unrealistic to believe that I can cut 5% off halfway through the year. I can order less pens and paper and ink and stuff like that. But my biggest line item, maybe I can have no overtime. Maybe that's what that tells me. Hey, look, don't give out overtime. But for my department and probably the recorder's office, the clerk's office, assessor's office, the offices that are all based on pretty much salaries and benefits, your biggest item, you're not gonna see much change from us because we can't.
We can't.
So your departments you're looking at that maybe have bigger expenditures like OSTA that's purchasing items and panels and whatever, they probably have an easier time doing those cuts. But for some, it's not really realistic to think that I can just take 5% off my lineup even through the end of the year.
But, the hard part is we're looking at it, it's just this year right here, but we also have to understand that this is a structural deficit, right? Until our top line starts growing. These cuts are gonna have to be coming in for this year and next year
Yeah,
as
but
well.
that's a part of next year's budgeting, so.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still,
I understand.
someone's job doesn't end between now and then. It's
Shock.
There's also something that just occurred to me too, is that there's a lot of grants that depended on matches, and the grants is money that's coming into the county. And so that match to that grant is actually worth more money. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So looking at that holistically also, I think is very important.
And you have contract obligations.
That's right. Yeah, which you can't obviously get you out of.
going back to previous here, as a department head, I would still like to know, it's hard to cut halfway through the year on salaries, etc. I can cut overtime. Even if you can't cut as a department head, I would still like to know this is why, this is the lookout. And then I expect OSTA or someone who can cut cost expenditures to be like, hey, we could cut that cost versus, hey, I can't cut, this staff person.
So I think we'll make that decision at the next meeting. We make that an agenda item to decide on the percent. I don't think we need to decide that now or start. And I think we really need to think about, we have a half an hour to start just lining up the agenda items, the decisions that need to be made at that budget workshop.
Well, I'm figuring out the time that we're gonna have that because I can't be here the 2 hours before the meeting on the 1st. Jacques said he's traveling, and so
I'll be traveling.
so I think if there's a different
my husband
traveling
is gone,
time that he could say, oh, I could come at this point in time. I will be driving because I already switched. I had a training from my company that was that morning, and I already switched it, so I have to be there at 8 a.m. But I'm not going to be able to.
I'm
be able to get here.
My travel plans until July 4th, they're pretty nebulous, unfortunately. And I'd have to get back to folks. I could try to pin a time down, but I have to consult with my.
We need a quorum.
And it'll be recorded, So if you submitted questions that you
Okay.
really wanted to identify,
I'd very much like to be here, I mean,
then I think you can address the majority of it, because we're not gonna suspend policy and we're not gonna vote on it the same day, we're not gonna take action item on. So missing the workshop isn't too terrible, especially if you can submit some questions.
I mean, I can hop on Zoom as I drive.
We're gonna
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we don't have that.
Do it.
I'm gonna jump on Zoom, but.
It's just a workshop. It's a workshop.
That's a workshop.
It's not burning a hat going.
I know. I'm like not watching it, but listening.
Yeah, this is gonna be
Right.
So 2 hours prior to the next commission meeting?
I think that's what we have.
That's
We're gonna talk about, like you said, essential services, those line items, and then the rec, film and convention, those line items.
percentage that we wanna.
The percentage.
Go at.
Do we want to talk about the capital projects? Do we want to talk about the pickleball slash, do we want to talk about that? I think.
Yeah.
It's important to talk about that. Do you agree?
I do.
Okay, great. There's a lot of angst
Also
surrounding
on what Mary had said as well, so if we do get that little list prior to that, Mark, the departments of what can be cut, right, that might also provide flexibility
Yeah.
on the other side, right? Because I don't think that, I mean, I'll just tell you honestly, I don't think that even if we said, okay, we want to see 5% cut out, I don't think that we're gonna see that 5% cut out at the end of the year, right? I think that that's gonna be a goal that we're gonna work towards, but I don't see us making that. But if we do know at least a little bit of what that possibility looks like, what the easy line is gonna be, you know, it'll help us make some of those other decisions that we're making.
And Bill, you've already mentioned this, but I think staffing and benefits, you know, obviously salary and benefits is huge. And if we do have positions that can be left unfilled, I think it's imperative to leave them unfilled.
So we have some positions that are on the website posted right now. Would we go through those and just take them off and not have that?
I would think about it. I don't know. I'm not the boss. I'm not
I mean,
the.
there's some that are, like, we need a planning.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we need a plan.
No,
Yeah, there's some that are imperative, but I think
some are and some aren't.
Right, and I don't know if we make that decision as a commission during the next meeting, we go through, but I would think that that's. If they are not absolutely necessary, I think we should pull them for now, for this year.
I think we put those on as part of the agenda on the next meeting,
That'd be great. Yeah,
just determine what's essential in our open
I think
position.
that's a great idea. Because I know talking to,
Those, as soon as we have that list. What's missing? You know, positions that we have fulfilled. If we
That's
can
what I
have
have
that
there.
list as soon as possible to look at.
And so then what I have then on for that next agenda will be essential services, non-essential services, the percent that we're looking to cut over the entire county, capital projects, and then positions that we want to fill and not fill.
that sounds good.
You got all that, Mark?
Essential services, non-essential services,
Percent that we were looking to cut,
And
capital projects,
capital projects.
and then positions.
And then Stephen, I know you already asked this question. I guess I want to reiterate that it's been answered, like, what are we asking? If people are gonna come and present slash answer our questions, what are we asking them to do?
It was the question I
I don't
posed.
think
Yeah.
that we're asking anybody to come present personally. I mean, if they want to come and present something, we'd probably give them time, but I'm not looking for any additional information. I think that the numbers that Stephen and Gabe are providing are making some decisions we have to make here.
I think they have two options. They could come and present and tell us why they need all the money.
Narrative, right?
Or they can come and present and say, hey, I've got a plan, so don't cut my stuff if I can make my own cuts and this is my recommendation. Those would be the two ideas that I would think of.
I like that. No.
Yeah, I think, you know, I went to the rec board the other night, that, you know, they were able to outline for me like what exactly they need that funding for, you know? And so I think that somebody from those entities would probably want the ability to at least answer any questions, to be here, you know? So I like that.
But we're right now,
And I think there's nuances to things too, like, for example, the grant funding, I think that, you know, that's more important money because potentially it's worth double, triple, 10 times price of admission. And so figuring out where strategically where we spend some of that money to maximize our return is important.
As in maximize our
Keep those,
hopefully increase of revenue, right?
right, right. I mean, grants are revenue, right? It brings money in. I mean, we spend the money, so a match to a grant, a lot of times it's a small percentage, sometimes it's up to 50%. That's money that, say, just to throw a number out there, $100,000, that $100,000 potentially turn into $200,000 or $500,000.
If, again, I know you've said if you want people to, if they want to come and show and present, I think that's fine, but we've got to allocate time for it.
I think we decided
Yeah.
10 minutes max.
Okay, which departments are you inviting?
The departments are the law
Financial
enforcement,
services.
solid waste, search and rescue, museum, recreation special service district, and GCAT, right? Because those are the ones that we're talking about most.
That's for the
That's
TRT, right?
five, right?
That's five. I think.
Unless you're breaking law enforcement, search and rescue up.
I think they could be together, but that's up to them.
5 minutes to go through. Okay,
I would
Well,
also,
10 minutes total.
10 minutes
Presentation
total.
And questions, so they
So
can
that-
figure out.
I would,
that's a minimum of 50 minutes, and I'm gonna guess that they do 15 minutes.
And are those, you including those two, right?
I would also include
So what we're asking, what we really want to
about
ask them,
playgrounds.
so.
Just again, if she wanted to
Because
ask,
they're gonna all, if they're afraid they're gonna get cut, they're all gonna want to probably be here.
Well, some of those are pretty, I mean, the museum's really easy. It's just literally like $115,000, right?
Would Angie be different in the recreation special?
well,
service?
because she has that project, I would just ask that maybe she just, she might want to be here, just to answer questions if we.
Because that was a question I had too, because the way that the TRCCA is set up. So we fund OSTA at the TRCCA, but then also when I looked at the Rec SSD, they are also funding OSTA out of that same. So is that
Pastor.
as a pass-through? So is the grant or is the money that we're giving Rec SSD just funneling right back into OSTA as well? Like is it a two
I
prongs?
think a lot of it is.
That's a question.
Yeah, I know, but you have their budget right there, Mike. You
Yeah, I got it right here too.
Because I know they, yes, yes.
I
They
think a lot
love
of
the
it.
maintenance and.
I know.
So,
Because you got 95,000 of that goes to maintenance and operation, and 85,000 that goes to projects.
Yeah.
5,000 that goes to ball fields. So that's the.
Yeah.
That's the question, because that's right now coming out of rec film and convention.
You also want anybody that's receiving funds like EMS. No. So I've got 6 all day. You probably want to slot 90 minutes for that.
Yeah,
No, we're gonna make it shorter than that, Steve. We're not
Okay,
gonna let
10
them go
minutes.
over the 10 minutes with questions. They're gonna have 5 minutes to present, 5 minutes for questions.
and they may not want to present, they may just want to be.
And then you guys, what are you doing with your rest of your hour if this is 2 hours?
With deliberating.
Okay, just trying to put the,
Same thing we're doing right now.
excellent, all right. You guys have topics?
Yeah, so,
Okay.
All of them.
yeah, I think we have a clear, now we have a clear.
Possibly need some updated information and some answers from Gabe and Steve for the next session.
Yeah, we're gonna,
Back
I
to,
think our goals, we could set goals.
Mhm.
Well, I think our goal is to balance out the TRT.
Mhm.
Right there and make sure that that's balanced out and so that we'll know exactly what we're gonna be pulling from general fund.
Yep.
And what we're going to be, and what we're gonna have to cut.
Yep.
I think that would be the goal for the 1, and then the 2 would be to come down with our final list of the capital projects. And the other goal is to, after that's taken care of, figure out what the percentage cut that we wanna make is.
I think that sounds good.
and then back to the transfers that you mentioned earlier. I believe Seth mentioned that those can't happen until after the budget is amended. I think even though we'll be discussing those
I don't. Maybe the
those
2025s, maybe the 2025 can't happen, but
Right.
2024, I think that can happen from that motion that was made.
2023, 2024. Once we validate those numbers that are actual transfers, becomes an accounting entry
Okay,
for our 24 financials.
okay, so we'll want a good accounting of what those numbers are at that next meeting.
We can share that number, but it's just an accounting entry.
Right, okay.
We also have a.
25s cannot take place until we've amended the budget, correct, Gabe?
Correct.
That's what I was,
Yeah, that's fine.
I meant, sorry.
So I want to make sure, so it's Melody, myself and Sean that will not be here in person for the budget workshop.
I'll definitely not be here in person. I'll do my utmost to zoom in. Yeah.
Melody, did you have a request?
Still holds.
Just update, when we talk about capital projects, some updated future, because we talked about like Star Hall. I mean, by then we might have that bill, but
Okay.
Star Hall and the pickleball court, and if there are other items that are capital projects that we don't have, because they don't necessarily get in the budget, but they're like planned for. So if we could have a list of those items that are upcoming, future potential capital. Yes.
I have a question on the pickleball courts. So is it 600,000 for the pickleball courts?
Here, I got you.
Match is 600,000.
660.
But that's for everything. How much are the pickleball courts?
Pickleball fields are 440,000. I believe.
Is that
Match?
match?
Is that the
Or-
match?
Total.
That's the total.
That's the total.
So the match.
The cost of pickleball courts is $440,333.
The match
What's
was
the-
220.
Playground.
Even if,
The playground is $761,534.76.
Got it.
But did it have to be kind of a package deal to get the
Yeah,
grant?
It has to be the whole
Yeah.
deal.
That's right,
Grant
matching.
fully applied.
Wow, piece,
We
okay,
can't-
all of it.
Can't piece out if you're expecting the grant.
have we already, are we obligated to that? Have we already signed that contract for? with
If
grant?
there's a contract, yeah,
Okay.
if there's,
Oh, we voted to not, or we didn't accept the
there's likely, and I can pull the contract up, there's likely language about allocation. We always put in government contracts, if funds aren't allocated for it, there's a way out, but I will put that on my list of things to do. Can I ask one, I'm sorry to, I'm just want to make sure the presentations go really well. When do you want all of these, if these agencies are planning on presenting, when do you want their slideshow, PDF, whatever, due and put in the packet? Because I'm assuming we can have them come up and put their whatever laptop connect, but if they're 3 minutes to open that up and they're, I'd
No, we
rather
want
say,
that loaded up in the documents.
if they could
ahead
do
of
it,
time.
if they could deliver it as a PDF, then we can just open it up on our end and scroll through it.
Right.
So when do you want them,
I would-
if they're going to
I'd try
present.
give them as much time as possible. I would say the Friday. If that would be okay with the chair.
Yeah,
Spend the policy.
I don't want to suspend the rest of the agenda policy because we've done good. If there's other items that are going on the agenda, let's stick to our regular deadline. But for these presentations on the budget workshop.
That gives them at least a week to try to figure it out.
Friday.
Alright,
We want to put a time on Friday because staff's still gonna need to get them uploaded, so noon on Friday. That gives Dana time to make this work.
and then that way it gives commissioners that are going to be absent the ability to look at the presentation, ask questions and their colleagues, or they could email them to Mark, myself, or however we want to do that.
Sounds good.
And then we won't be voting on it that night. We'll be voting on it on the 15th.
We'll be voting on the amended budget on the 15th.
That's what I meant.
Right.
When does the public hearing open that night then?
On the
6 that night. No, 6 PM that night.
After we did a workshop,
Yep.
the budget hearing.
Yes. That'll be on that agenda item as well, on that agenda, I mean. The public hearing. That clear, everybody?
There is mud as
I was
usual.
about to say the same thing.
You were gonna say the same thing.
All right, do we have anything further? Gabe, Steve, we're all good?
Got our work cut out for us. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you, guys.
Quotation.
All right, I will adjourn this meeting at 10:47 on the 23rd of June. Thank you, everybody, and this has been the workshop, the budget workshop.
I have those exact pickleball court funds too. The amounts on each one, but there's also. Just so everyone knows, there's a post
No, didn't.